Go.
Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk Show with Waylon Lewis, coming to you from my living room in Boulder, Colorado. And today I'm honored and excited to be here with Shannon Galpin, a longtime friend who I really don't know at all. And we're going to get into women's rights, particularly in Afghanistan, through bicycling and art and activism, how we all can kind of engage whatever we love to be of service in a fun way to the world. Does that cover it?
That covers it.
All right. There will be a surprise, super sexy, exciting thing toward the end. Just made that up. All right. So we begin these because it's Boulder. I apologize. You're from Aspen or something?
Breckenridge.
Breckenridge.
Little less.
Still pretty weird town. But Boulder, we begin with a bow and meditation. Bow. Everyone watching can join in, offer a bow to Shannon and to her mission and also to your mission in your life. So the bow is from the Buddhist tradition. You don't have to be Buddhist to do it. It's just like a handshake, basically. Just take a good posture. Try and connect to your own mission in your life. You can kind of ground in the earth and connect your head with the realm of the heavens. That's like the realm of ideas, vision, inspiration. Find your breath and your heart and give it away. I feel better already. And then we begin with your permission, 30 seconds. It's like a prayer, moment of silence, whatever you want to do. I'll lead a brief meditation. Again, it's very basic. You can do this whatever your religious tradition or if you're atheist. So just find your breath, good posture, open eyes in this particular meditation practice. Your hands can be kind of flat and resting on your thighs. You can lean back or just sit up straight. Find your breath in and out. Then if you notice yourself having a thought, whether it's of the future or the past, regret or thoughts about lunch, it can be heavy, positive, negative, light, it can be a song in your head, doesn't matter. You just label it thinking. Like, oh, I'm thinking, and then return your attention to your breath. So let's try that. Okay. Thanks so much. And if you didn't do it, thanks for pretending to do it. So now we're to the fun part. So first of all, I'm just super excited to kind of meet you and know you because you're, as I was saying, I do a lot of talk show videos, and some people are kind of like, you can tell that like their PR agent plugged them in that morning and then pushed them toward us, and then they sit there like promoting their stuff.
Yeah.
And you're clearly a human being.
I am. I'm a PR nightmare, but I am a human being.
Which is a compliment in Elephant Land. So can you take me to, when did all this start? 6 years ago?
Yeah, 2007 is when I decided to do this, and then fully engaged 2008 by traveling to Afghanistan for the first time.
So in 2006, 2007, what's your life like before all this?
I was a sports trainer. So I spent, essentially since I was 19 working as an outdoor specialist and a sports conditioning specialist with pro rugby teams and footballers. And
Oh, so not like all mountain biking stuff.
No, not at all. In fact, I was a trail runner and not even a mountain biker. So the irony is the mountain biking literally started by a fluke here in Boulder, actually, at Hall Ranch, right when I was launching Mountain to Mountain. And it was not. It
wasn't part of it.
Was never part of it. It has definitely defined me.
Yeah.
But it was never part of it.
Now it's like bicycle to bicycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mountain bicycle to mountain bike. So, and you have a daughter, and you have a house, and then what changes when you start all this?
Everything changes. Holy cow. Yeah. My daughter was 3 at the time, and the first time I went to Afghanistan, and so I leveraged over this kind of the course of working in Afghanistan and launching this nonprofit, everything. Yeah. So I completely took, I sold my home, I leveraged the loan against my car, I learn to live very simply, and my daughter has learned to live very simply, which is not, I don't think, a bad thing. But it was this realization that if you want to do the work that's important to you, sometimes that means you have to do the work first before you can kind of rally the masses behind it for funding and support. And for me, it was definitely a case of I'm pretty stubborn and uncompromising, and I was like, I know what I want to do. I know the work that needs to be done, and if people don't want to fund it, fine, I will find a way to fund it. And to me, that's worth the financial risk that faces my daughter and I, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and 6 years doesn't seem that long to me because I'm so old, but like to kids like Rachel is back here, Kickstarter probably wasn't even active then, so you had to like I went through the same thing, as you may know. Like, my house was in foreclosure when I decided to take my successful magazine online, and I lost my staff, yada yada.
Yeah.
But this isn't about me. So
well,
and
you've
then,
been there. You know what it is.
Yeah. So thank you, Kickstarter, for coming along. So and then, what was the inspiration to turn your life inside out and upside down? The
inspiration is actually a pretty like black cloud, and it really is kind of that silver lining. I was pregnant with my daughter when my only sister was raped at college.
Oh.
I myself am a victim of gender violence, so it played a role.
Which gender violence, excuse my ignorance, is that like sexual harassment or rape?
In my case, it was a really violent rape that almost killed me.
Wow.
So that happened when I was 18, and and I went through my life and was a sports trainer. But when it happened to my sister, who's 10 years younger than me, who's kind of 10 years, you kind of feel like you're part mom, part guardian. You know, you're not equals. You're kind of a baby sister. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She called me from college in Southern Colorado, and I was living in Breckenridge, and it was this realization that I think becoming a parent, realizing what my parents must have gone through, that, wow, you have 2 daughters, and it happened to both of them about a 12-year distance apart, completely different states, completely different circumstances, but that this is a reality. And I was more, I think, cognizant of that, obviously becoming a mother, and I think I was fed up. I was just like, enough is enough. And I channeled my energy into looking at, well, what is the worst place in the world to be a woman? Well, Afghanistan is the country that repeatedly ranks as #1 as the worst place in the world to be a woman, and that's where I decided I needed to start.
It's so interesting you went that far away, because you had no connection with Afghanistan.
I know. I was very aware of its history. I was incredibly drawn to its culture for a long time before, just on a personal level.
What about it?
I'm not even sure. It's that gut sort of draw to, I think, the fact that it's part of the Silk Road. And I think the fact that we're so engaged with Afghanistan as a country, but we know nothing about it. We know nothing about its people. We know nothing about its humanity. We know it as a war zone.
Soviet Union, U.S., it's like in the middle of every nightmare.
Yeah, women are oppressed, Taliban, Buddha's blown up, all of that sort of stuff. But we don't know anything about its humanity. And I was fascinated about, if I wanted to work in this country, if I wanted to work with women who did not have a voice, could we also highlight the humanity back here, where we are intrinsically tied with this country militarily and politically? And
it's so interesting you wouldn't go into some sort of like therapy, like how can we help people like myself or my sister who have encountered this horrible thing. You're like almost trying to, beyond nipping something in the bud, you're approaching like the worst, the hardest place, the Mordor of our international karma.
I honestly didn't even know, which is ridiculous. I'm sure everybody from the outside knew. I had no idea that my own attack or my sister's attack had any bearing on me launching mountain to mountain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, none.
So it wasn't the inspiration.
It is now when I look
cognizantly.
back. Cognizantly, exactly.
Consciously, yeah.
I think everybody who knew me was like, well, duh.
Yeah. Wow.
But I was completely oblivious, and probably like purposefully like, no, this is about doing what's right. It's about making the world a better place. I feel drawn to this. I don't know why. And then, like, literally 2 years in was when I realized, like, oh, yeah.
Wow.
I see the path laid out behind me, like breadcrumbs.
So in Buddhism, it's actually on our toe pegs. It says if you want to be happy or if you want to heal, anything like that, the easiest and most powerful way is to help others.
Really?
Which is interesting.
That is interesting.
That's sort of how you...
I would say Afghanistan and my work there definitely healed me. Especially because I did a lot of work.
I wanted to ask, like, through this process now, it's been 6 years or something. Has that Has that helped your internal?
I didn't think I was broken.
Yeah.
But apparently, you know, we all have our issues that we haven't dealt with. And in my case, especially because I used to work in the women's prisons in Afghanistan, some of my earlier projects were in the women's prisons and girls' education. And it made me realize that I have a voice, and I have a responsibility to use it, and I have a responsibility to use my voice for others that don't yet have a voice.
And when you say you have a voice, is that your filmmaking? What do you mean by that?
I think it's the ability to share stories of women who don't have voices. It's the activist that has kind of been born out of this, that says we have to shine a spotlight on what's happening in the world, and we can't pretend it's not happening in our own backyards. We can't pretend that we don't have an ability to affect change, because everybody does, and it's little, and it may be drop by drop, but that we have to use our voices in order to create people's we have to use our voices so that people actually give a shit, and then maybe change can come out of that.
Yeah, and also I do think, you know, so many of us look at climate change or women's rights or these like seemingly insurmountable problems, or like poverty or homelessness, and then, you know, it's actually kind of fun and empowering, even though so much of this is heavy, what we're talking about, to get off the couch or off our laptop and actually.
And I think that's the problem, is, like you said, they seem insurmountable. So I think a lot of people, then it's that even though they care, they're so overwhelmed by this barrier of, oh, well, but I'm one person, and this is global change or women's rights, or, you know.
What am I going to do about climate change?
Exactly. Like, me conserving water doesn't make a lick of difference. Or, you know, but it's the, I always kind of bring it back to voting. If you look at voting, you think, does it really matter if I show up and give my vote? Who cares? You vote because you believe that others that think the same of you will also vote, and that becomes a wave.
And time and again, we've seen like 400 votes separated Ohio, which determine the.
If you aren't willing to engage, then you don't get to say, well, you know, this is an issue and woe is us. No, you have to get off the couch. You have to get engaged, and, you know, vote by vote or drop by drop, our actions matter. But they matter because everybody believes that their actions matter.
Yeah, and even if, anyway, I'm super into the whole voting thing too. Even if you don't believe in, like, you know, you think voting is corrupt and the government's corrupt, whatever, like 250,000 Coloradoans just signed on in protest against fracking.
Yes.
And even though we just had this sort of compromise defeat, depending on your opinion, we got a lot more than we had. It's still a lot less than what people need.
Yeah, because it shows that people are not going to just sit back, that people care.
Yeah. So I really want to focus on how everyone here can do this in their own life. I think you're a great example of how to connect, like how to plug in. But first, maybe specifically, could you like walk us through like what is the day-to-day, like if an Afghan woman wakes up, what is her life like?
Well, it really depends. There's not a very good black and white. There's, I look at kind of in a real simplistic view, there's urban and there's rural. Because a lot of urban women in Afghanistan, you know, they're going to school, they're often going to college, their families are more educated, they are more educated, and so they
like
have
a phone.
Yeah, definitely. They have a phone, they have friends. But that's, you know, in 5 or 6 urban
Can they
cities.
walk around on their own?
They can walk around on their own. Most. You still see burqas. You still see women that you know, are walking a couple steps behind their male escort. But then you see, and if you just went to
Which is contrary to laws of nature, because every woman I've ever walked with, I'm always trailing behind. Women have this ability to walk really quickly. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's, you know, we're on a mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people, they go to Kabul, especially a lot of international aid workers and embassies, and you know, it's kind of it's the center, and it's kind of this little bubble. And you see women activists, you see women running for president, you see women running for parliament. Like you see women really like embracing this post-Taliban
So they're not equal. They're still in danger. They still have acid attacks and stuff, right?
Definitely, yeah. And they're risking their family's dishonor by running for parliament or president, but they're doing it.
What a weird society.
Oh, it's
like if I ran for president or something, my family would be like, "Oh my God!" I mean, it would be a total joke, so they wouldn't be that proud. But if it weren't a total joke, it would be the greatest honor, right? family member to.
Because you're like, wow, this person's going to represent me, and this is part of my family.
Right.
No, and a lot of times, women are still threatened just for the nature of going to school. Girls are still threatened for walking to school, even in these big cities. But you see much more progress than when you're in the rural areas, which is about 80% of the country. That's when women and men are segregated, where I see women that can't leave the family home without a burqa, without a male escort, virtual slaves within the family.
And they're pretty full burqas,
completely,
right?
Yeah, completely covered.
They're not like a headscarf.
No, all they have is that little view right here.
Right.
And so their world is limited to that little piece of nets, that's what they can see. And it's dehumanizing. You can't tell what's underneath that burqa. And, you don't know if that's... quite frankly, it could be a man. There's no concept of what that human looks like. So, which is interesting because a friend of mine who remembers his parents telling him about the Taliban times when every woman was in a burqa. I was like, well, how did people meet? How did you assess a woman's beauty? Old Persian and Afghan poets talk about, romanticizing women's beauty. How did you even do that? He's like,
so it wasn't always like this.
Wasn't always like this. This was really kind of, this happened after the Russians invaded. So this was Soviet invasion time.
So in like the 50s or 60s?
70s.
70s.
Yeah. In the 60s, it was part of the hippie trail. And it was a touristed area.
Right.
There's pictures of women in miniskirts, no headscarves.
I've actually seen those photos.
Yeah, they're incredible. Yeah. And it shows you,
they're like typing and
with guys next to them, and it looks like Midwest Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, to me, epitomizes that if you can look backwards and see that change, that makes you realize that change is possible. They haven't always been this way. Women have had a lot more freedoms in the past.
I think that's one thing, like, we in the West really want to be careful about, like, condemning someone's culture or religion. But so that's really interesting. It's not inherently part of this culture. It's not inherently even part of religion. There's religious moderates, religious liberals who respect women's equality.
Exactly. And I think you have that, like you say, in any religion. You have the fundamentalists that twist it. Yeah. And it's always about control. It's always about power.
Oh, even in Buddhism, where it's stated super clearly by the Buddha and everybody that women are equal, and like the Buddha helped liberate all the underclass, what were they called in India?
Like the Dalits and the
untouchables.
Untouchables, yeah.
Is that what that's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. I need more coffee apparently today. But still, within Buddhist culture, women are like, don't get to do everything.
Yeah.
They can't become formal nuns or whatever.
And the monks versus nuns, like there's a definite difference there. And I think that's every single religion. We see that.
Yeah. And so modern day, like people, Pema Chodron, whatever, are fighting for more equality, which is so.
Yeah, women, and that's probably a big part of it is women's rights is not limited to countries like Afghanistan. I mean, it's the U.S. It's everywhere. I mean, we're fighting these fights in the U.S. right now, where we're looking at women having to fight to even have the right over to decide what we do with our own bodies. Mm. That fight was fought in my grandmother's era. Like, we won that fight, and we're now, it's coming back up through House and Senate and all these things. And
well,
you just think
locally. I mean, they're attacking it locally, which is smart.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and, U.S. women's suffrage was just, when was that, like the 20s or something? My dates are all off today. But, so it's relatively new that we respect, at least on paper, we respect the rights of women and we respect the rights of African Americans and etc. Exactly. So we're far from perfect.
Exactly. It's not that long ago.
But, I like to look at Rachel. She is your, typical, if not average, bolder. Rachel works with the talk show. Thank you. She's back here. She can live with her boyfriend. She can go out to a bar. She can read. She can be. She doesn't have to cover up. She can wear a skirt, ride a bike, go for a hike. It's like the things we take for granted in our life, and I certainly take relatively for granted. I mean, I kind of appreciate it, but
we all take
these women really can't do almost any of those things without risk.
Without risk, exactly. And until recently, that in particular, riding a bike was completely taboo.
So why is riding a bike taboo? That's so funny.
I've been trying to figure this out for years.
Because it's independence.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I couldn't figure it out because in 2009 I started mountain biking in Afghanistan, and it really was to start to have these conversations around gender barriers, and I look at countries in Southeast
with men
Asia.
and women.
Exactly. With
So
men and
interesting. And you were saying you're like a third gender when you're there.
Yeah. So I realized women couldn't ride bikes, and after 3 or 4 visits in Afghanistan, realized that I have this really unique role as a foreign woman, as this honorary man. So I get to push a little bit further often than an Afghan woman would, or certainly I can push without the same risks. And I was fascinated with the idea that bikes are used as these vehicles for social justice in Southeast Asia, throughout Africa, where girls and boys can ride bikes to school that maybe they couldn't normally have the access to just by walking. Maybe it's 2 villages over.
Right.
Getting midwives' bikes to access medical care. Like, bikes are this
You
really
can carry things.
Yeah, it's effective, it's green, it's
Yeah.
efficient, it's cheap. It's kind of this perfect little vehicle. And in Afghanistan, it would be an amazing tool for women, and women can't ride bikes.
Yeah, every like 10 or 12-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever in the U.S. knows the importance of a bike. You get your own bike, you're like, freedom.
Yeah, the neighborhood is mine. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And you see Afghan boys that way. Like, they're just like tearing up the dirt roads, or tearing through town. And I just wanted to have those conversations. And I thought, well, what if I just gently start to push and just be on a bike and just see what the reaction is from Afghan men. And time again, it was the most amazing icebreaker. Conversations, they'd stop me, and at first I'd be kind of like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what's going on? Why are you here? And so I get to share my culture with them. This is why I'm here. This is the work I'm doing. And they would share some of their culture. They'd invite me back for tea or to have dinner.
They don't hate the work you're doing?
No, not at all.
You're saying
I'm not riding my
women.
bike in Kandahar, where the Taliban are fairly control. I'm picking areas of the country that are relatively safe.
But the Taliban are everywhere.
They are everywhere. Right? But there's areas where they're not in control, like where they don't own like an entire province.
So you're pretty safe.
Pretty safe.
Wow.
Yeah, I try to mitigate the risk. I choose very carefully where I ride.
Right.
But you never know. There could be some that, also people are mobile, people are in cars, motorcycles. But time and time again, the response was positive because I was a foreigner, and we could have these really amazing conversations about, do you let your girls go to school? If so, why? If not, why? Can your girls play sports? Often it was yes, they can play soccer or volleyball,
really?
But could they ride a bike? No. No, we'd never let our girls ride bikes. And in Kabul, you'd have these girls, they're boxers. There's a boxing team, there's a taekwondo team, but bikes.
Wow.
Yeah, totally taboo. And I think what I've discovered, it always comes back to freedom of movement. Independence.
Right. Wow. So with Mountain to Mountain, you have a book coming out. Is it called Mountain to Mountain?
Yeah, kind of confusing. My organization is Mountain to Mountain with the number 2, and then my book, my publisher gets the credit for that name because it wasn't my first choice. It was Mountain to Mountain, because I founded the organization on the idea that there's an old Afghan proverb that no matter how high the mountain, there's always a road. And I live in a mountain community. I work in mountain communities.
Right. It's like Breck to
exactly
whatever.
Breckenridge to Kabul, sort of thing. Yeah.
And so, what's your book about? Your story and.
Yeah, so my book comes out, and it literally it's a memoir about the journey of becoming an activist, starting to work in Afghanistan, my bike adventures in Afghanistan, seeing it on the back of a motorcycle, on a mountain bike, and seeing this country in a very different way than most people see this country.
Right, so once you're having all these conversations, what came out of that? Like the women's team or...
So a lot of the conversations led to furthering the work that I do, whether that was in the women's prisons, whether that was girls' education, and over time finding the first Afghan girls that were riding bikes. And
who were already or getting them on a bike?
Some of them were already. They had been refugees in Iran or Pakistan and had learned, came back to Afghanistan and weren't riding because it wasn't safe. And in this post-Taliban era, there's starting to be this feeling among, especially like high school, college girls, like, why can't I do this? Like, it's kind of an inability to accept that these rules are set. They're now pushing, and I think the internet helps. A lot of them are on Facebook.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So they're allowed to be on Facebook?
Well, in the urban areas, and maybe they're not allowed. Maybe they just are. But they have access to computers. There's now some women's internet cafes.
God, if you want to suppress women's rights, you got to get them away from the computers.
Exactly. What are they thinking?
Yeah, come on, Taliban.
So yeah, and everybody's got cell phones. People can Twitter off of a really basic old school cell phone. I mean, that has opened up so much.
Wow. So yeah, I might have rushed us through that. So you were working with the prison. So what all came out of that?
Well, so I really went over there originally with the idea of I wanted to work as one woman for women and be a voice for women that didn't have a voice, and that international aid is inherently dysfunctional. So what could I be doing differently? How could I be working to empower women in its truest sense versus, oh, we're going to do an empowerment workshop, or we're going to train women to do X, Y, and Z, but then we're done and we're out. And
is that the problem, that they then pull out?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
so there's no lasting safety, there's no ongoing kind of thing.
No, and often you're training them to do something maybe that there's not necessarily a market for, there's not necessarily a need for, because people aren't listening. And so my goal was to listen, to engage, to share the stories back in the U.S. in hopefully engaging ways, like through photography, film, storytelling, other mediums, and connect people. And
how did you fund all this?
Mostly through sacrificing, my house, my car, my everything.
But fundraising as well,
and
or sponsors, or
fundraising.
Something?
I've had a couple amazing sponsors that have really supported the work I've done.
Who are those?
Osprey Packs has been. I'm not even in their normal kind of realm of people they would support, and they just got behind me from the beginning, which is amazing. And more recently, Live, which was formerly Live Giant, they came on once I found the women's national cycling team, and they've sent me over with like 50, 60 racing bikes, clothing, gear, and they're also helping fund the documentary that we're working on that tells the story of these amazing women that, these women are literally risking their lives to ride a bike.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, it must be scary. You feel like their mother on some level, or their governess or something. Yeah. Like in
it makes me sound like an old 60-year-old woman with a cane.
No, what's the one she floats around London.
Oh, Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins. She was young. She was young and hot.
There you go. And she had that magic bag. If I had that magic bag, I could rule the world.
Yeah, and the umbrella.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty cool. You can fly.
And exactly.
But you must feel sort of responsible for them. Like you're encouraging them on some level to risk their lives. Obviously they want to, and it's for a great cause. But how do you?
So that's a really great question, because I get that a lot. And I think what I have always looked at is they made the choice to ride bikes. They made the choice to form a team. They have an Afghan man who is their coach, he coached the men's team.
Good for him.
Yeah.
That's cool.
He wanted his daughter to ride and decided, okay, and it always starts really organically. Yeah. And what I've always made sure is that as the foreign woman, never push. That's they have to go at their own pace, and it's their project. I said this earlier. It's like girls who have sustained acid attacks walking to school. You don't not build the school. You don't stop education because girls may get attacked walking to school. You build more schools. You encourage more girls to go to school. You break that cycle, and then you mitigate the risk. You try to get them a bus. You try to get them an escort. You do whatever you can to try to keep them safe, but you don't stop doing the work. These girls know they're on the front line, and change does not happen by playing it safe. It just doesn't. You look out throughout history. Change does not happen when women sit back and say, oh, okay, I'll wait for you to give me my rights. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. All that was quote of the day. I think we can just press stop. I mean, that's so brave. I mean, not to be too personal. We've already been too personal. But given, your experience with rape and your sisters, and you can't stop life just because horrible things happen, unspeakably horrible things. You still have to
And I have a real interesting theory on that. Now that I'm aware of that role in terms of the work I'm doing, which I wasn't at first, I think that the way that we approach international aid is completely wrong. I think that we look at these people, whether it's individual women, groups of women, a country like Afghanistan, we say those poor people, they're victims. Instead of realizing that, I look at it from my own personal response is, as a victim, quote unquote, I'm actually a million times stronger than I ever would have been had that not happened. Now, do I want people to gain their strength from horrible, violent situations?
So,
no.
yeah.
But the fact is often those women are the catalysts for change in their own country because they have already survived. So they already have this kind of deep well of strength.
Right.
We just have to access it.
Or like Malala.
Perfect example. You get shot in the head. Does she shut up? No, she gets louder.
Yeah.
That's strength. And you don't want someone to be shot in the head in order to give them a voice. But we also have to look at the fact that people, women, communities who are quote-unquote victims are also potentially the best catalyst we have for change.
Right, and she continues to speak, or you continue to be an activist because you don't want others to have that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about empathy. It was this viral video a year ago, like empathy being the most powerful emotion. Because like when you experience something, then you can, and if it's suffering, then you can use that in a positive way.
Right.
Again, through healing by thinking about others. If you see others who are experiencing that, and you can try and help.
And I think that's a really, I haven't seen that. I'll have to look that up.
Oh, it's so good, yeah. It's on elephantjournal.com.
I'll look it up. I'll Google. Yeah. The thing with that, with the empathy, is really important because I think that is probably the most important emotion we need to cultivate, because I think what we do instead is we pity. And when
we're like, we were talking about climate change, we like disengage. We're like,
yeah, we're apathetic.
I can't handle it. I can't do anything.
I need to quit the wallet because it's like, and I see that like female genital mutilation, genital mutilation, excuse me, sex trafficking, child marriage. You get overwhelmed and you're like, oh, I can't take it. I can't take it. Well, you have to. You have to get it in your body and understand like, holy cow, this is huge. And then find a way to one, be empathetic and to take action.
But that's key, because I think people get apathetic. Speaking personally, I look at some huge problem. Like I'm always on the internet dealing with horrible situations, or often positive ones. And if I don't know what to do with it, then I am taking in all this emotion. I'm like crying on my laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know what to do with it.
And then you just shut the laptop. You're like, I got to go get a beer.
Yeah, I got to go watch some stupid movie, or
exactly.
I'm a lightweight with beer, but just
fall
asleep.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I think that is the issue, and to me, that's become the core of the work I do. Is if we can challenge the apathy, then we could literally engage an army of activists that could tackle the world. Right. And that to me is powerful. Because it's not saying that you have to change the world or I have to change the world. It's that each of us contributes, puts our drop in the bucket. Each of us does that, just like voting, because en masse we have enormous power. But so my work now has really evolved that as one woman, I'm limited to what I can do. I can't save the world. I'm one woman. But I can try to break through the apathy and literally try to build up an army of activists. So everything I'm doing going forward is about that.
Yeah, I think that's why on some level we're so like chemically tuned into, the constant like superhero movies, saving the world, James Bond, kind of all that
one
stuff.
One man can save the world, the world.
Or the Justice League or the Avengers. It could be a team.
It can be a team.
And unfortunately, they're saving the world against like made-up villains, and it's all kind of a waste of time. And you're buying like $9 popcorn, which is stupid. GMO popcorn usually, but it is this sort of analogy, it is the Joseph Campbell like hero's journey of how can I use my experience to help other people and bring in other people.
Yeah, because literally, it's not that these issues are insurmountable. They feel insurmountable, and I am guilty of feeling apathetic at times too. Even activists can, become apathetic. But
have you seen real concrete changes in these women's lives that you've touched?
Definitely. Well, just the fact that you have women. The hardest group was the women in the prisons, because I'm very limited as to what I can do. I'm not, I don't work in justice.
You can't get them out.
No, exactly. And if they got out, then what would they do? And
why are they in prison? All different reasons.
Most of them are in there for morality crimes, which is women who have been raped are then jailed to save face for, they're accused of adultery.
To save face for the rapist?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So talk about feeling about that big, and what can I do about that? But instead, what I realized was that was the first time I realized that voice has real weight, and that the ability to share your story with someone, which is what I encountered in the Kandahar prison, where women unloaded their stories to me, knowing I could do nothing, but that then I would take their stories outside of that prison and essentially someone bore witness.
Would you write them down?
I would write them down. I've talked about them sometimes.
You can't film them in there?
Can't film them in there. There's one prison I've been allowed to film, but never long enough to just like sit down and what I've talked about doing is like some sort of maybe NPR StoryCorps type thing in the future. But it's more important, I think, just that they've shared and someone gave a shit. Really, that's what it comes down to. That someone cared enough to actually say, what happened? Why are you here?
Then rape is to be jailed for being raped.
Exactly.
And like your whole life and voice shut down.
And other women are there, you know, they tried to escape an arranged marriage or helped others try to escape arranged marriages. All the normal sort of things that, but the women are the ones that get thrown in jail. And so there I felt incredibly helpless. But then you have these women, like these girls who are now riding bikes, like they're breaking really the last deep-seated taboo. I mean, up until like maybe a year or two ago, there were more women running for parliament than there were riding bikes. That's huge. That shows you like how controversial riding a bike is. And it comes down to, well, we talked about this briefly before of just turn of the century, women's suffrage. You know, back in the day, at the turn of the century in the U.S., women who were, you know, buttoned up to here, that were clothes all the way down to the floor, no skin showing at all, hats, gloves, they were considered promiscuous and immoral.
And that was a swimsuit outfit.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They were considered promiscuous and immoral for riding a bike. That's no different than what we see in Afghanistan. It's just it's a century apart. And so it's a matter of these women are the same as the first women who rode bikes in America, and they became the suffragettes. They're the ones who fought for women's rights and got us the right to vote. And we've seen that in America, in France, in England.
Wow. The
bikes for women have always led to enormous women's rights change.
It's funny because I ride a bike every day of the year. I don't have a car. And I think of a bike as like it's eco. You don't have to pay for parking. You don't have to pay for insurance. You know,
keeps
it's healthy.
Fit,
It's good for your mind when you're stressed out. Has so many advantages. It's affordable, like, you know, green.
It's a perfect little package.
Yeah, green has a reputation for being Whole Foods are expensive. Like bikes are pretty much free compared to like a car. But I haven't thought of it as like a vehicle for. I mean, what's the Susan B. Anthony quote or a bit of that?
Susan B. Anthony was a suffragette from the 1920s and integral to the women's rights movement. And she said the bike was by far the most effective tool that women had. And that bikes were the reason that women would get their rights.
So if you're a feminist, whether you're a man or a woman out there,
a bike.
Especially in the U.S., if you're not riding a bike, you're giving up the strongest tool for equality, even just maybe some more symbolically, hopefully these days in America.
Yeah.
So how can, I mean, for those who are willing to like turn their lives upside down or feel that germ of inspiration, how can we find, through your example, you know, find our access point? Like, I love to write, I love to do whatever. How do I then make that of service to the whole world? How do others become activists?
I think that one of the biggest lessons I learned was don't do what I did. Like, you don't have to turn your life upside down.
I was going to say that. Don't do
this. No, please don't. Yeah. It's what I had to do. But I'm definitely a jump off and then figure it all out on the fall down before you go splat sort of person.
Were you like that before all of this?
Oh God, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you've always been a brave
loose cannon.
or whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
Loose cannon, stubborn, reckless. No, I'm not reckless, but I definitely am comfortable taking the risk. I think I literally myself, I happen to thrive in the deep end, and I'll learn to swim once I fall in. Like, I'm good at that, and that doesn't scare me. And that, I don't think that's normal, nor is that necessarily a good quality sometimes. I think a little prudence would be a good thing. But I do think that for others, what's important is don't look at that you have to turn your whole life upside down.
Okay.
I think it's that idea, like coming back to the vote. Know that you as one person have the capacity to affect one life. 2 lives, 3 lives, you know, whatever that is, whether that's in your backyard, whether that's half the world away. But I think it's that idea that what are you passionate about? What do you give a shit about? Is it the environment? Is it animal rights? Is it women's rights? And find out what that is. Some people don't even know what they're passionate about. Right. So you got to find that. And then find out, well, all right, so first step, how could I get engaged? Is it locally, backyard stuff? And what are your skill sets? But literally one little tiny drop does create change, because if everybody is putting their drop in the bucket, then, you know, we create a tsunami of change.
Okay. Well, I guess we should wrap up. Thank you so much. I know. It's been
started.
like 40 minutes. Rachel is giving me the sign for like 10 minutes. But thank you so much. It's a pleasure. That did feel like 5 minutes, and I'd be psyched to go for 20 more minutes. As always, you can find Walk the Talk Show on walkthetalkshow.com, elephantjournal.com, SoundCloud, and youtube.com/Waylon H. Lewis. Thank you so much, Shannon Galpin. Mountain to Mountain. Check out the book.
Thank you.